First of all, thank you so much for joining us and speaking with us today, Senator Merkley.
Well, Noelle, it's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, my first question for you. So, do you think that President Trump made the right decision striking Venezuela and capturing President Nicolás Maduro?
No, absolutely not. This is regime change in order to secure oil for America. And it repeats the classic mistakes of the past. He failed to get any form of congressional authorization for this act of war. Even with Iraq, President Bush secured congressional approval, and he operated outside the Constitution, therefore, in a fashion that undermines our fundamental values.
Yeah, and I mean, you just mentioned Iraq. We also saw this happen in Afghanistan as well. We tried a regime change. Do you think this is going to be any different now that the president's saying, we're going to take control of Venezuela?
Well, I just hear the echoes of presidents who thought it was easy to take out a government and install a new one and run a country. It didn't work in Afghanistan. It certainly didn't work in Iraq. Iraq was an absolute complete disaster. There's always unexpected consequences. In Iraq, you took out the major counterbalance to Iran, and Iran established a terrorist network that extended clear across an arc of the Middle East, clear to the coast of the Mediterranean and Lebanon. So here we have a country of some 30 million people. It is not a country that has overwhelming, if you will, energy, saying that this is a big victory for the citizens. And the president says he wants to run the country. Well, that is state building. And last I checked, Trump came into office saying he was against us engaging in state building enterprises across the world.
Yeah, he kind of ran on an America First agenda during his campaign.
Absolutely.
And do you think that this was really about stopping drugs, that this capture of Maduro and striking Venezuela, do you think that was Trump's real motive going in there?
No, the drugs were always a cover story. You'll recall in Iraq, the cover story was weapons of mass destruction. In this case, it was drugs, but the drug channel that was attacked is primarily a drug channel that supplies drugs to Europe. And while the president and his team talked about fentanyl, that comes from Mexico, not from Venezuela. Clearly, there's no sympathy for Maduro in terms of his leadership. He has been a poor manager, really an authoritarian leader who has done great harm to the country. Millions of people have left the country. But that raises a question. Are we going to be in the mode of going around the world and trying to throw out bad managers, dictators, and install our management team? We failed on that in Afghanistan. We failed on that in Iraq. And we're going to have major challenges here regarding Venezuela.
Yeah, and like you just mentioned, Maduro, he was not a good person. He was a dictator. Many Venezuelans didn't like living under his regime. And we're seeing protests, here in Portland, in Chicago, all across the country. They are protesting against what President Trump did, President Trump's moves. But we're also seeing pockets of America where there's Venezuelan populations. In Venezuela, some Venezuelans are celebrating what Trump did because, they wanted to see Maduro ousted. So what's your reaction to that?
Well, certainly I support the demonstrations where people have taken the street saying no to this effort to grab another country's oil, and are saying no to regime building or state building overseas, and who are noting that this undermines our authority under international law when we try to confront the malactions of other countries. And also folks are just pointing out the truth that this was an unconstitutional action because it was an act of war without consultation or requiring an authorization for the use of military force. So all of those reasons. Certainly there are folks who left Venezuela who know that they had a terrible dictator, who would like to see a better government be there. And I'm sympathetic to that. But don't you want the people of Venezuela to create that future, not for the U.S. to be in the business of going in and almost always messing up in a major way that costs our soldiers injuries, often their lives, often enormous treasure. The president said, "Oh, don't worry, all of this will be paid for by the oil." Well, that was also said about Iraq. And I must say that I think that we will see in the end a lot of cost in blood and treasure for this action.
Yeah, and then going back to those protests, though, some protesters, we even got a press release from an organization here in Portland. Some protesters are holding signs saying "Free Maduro." You may not agree with the way that Maduro was taken into custody, but do you agree with that sentiment that we should free Maduro even though he's in custody right now?
Well, I'm really focused on the question of how Congress addresses its proper role under the Constitution. And our proper role is to not allow this type of action to take place without authorization. I took to the floor and had the support of many of my colleagues in putting forward a bill called Preventing Unauthorized Military Action in Venezuela Act. And on December 10th, asked for unanimous consent to adopt that bill. Republicans objected to adopting it, but it was an effort to say, hey, we see what's unfolding here. It starts a drug operation, and then it pivots into basically regime change. And in the course of that, our military is going to be involved, and none of this has been presented. In fact, the president didn't just lie to the American people when he said this was about drugs. He lied to Congress. In the classified hearings, when we asked the question, is the administration planning regime change? They said no. Obviously, that was false, and it was not just propaganda casually done. It was done in classified settings.
And when Trump talks about regime change, what do you think that's going to look like? Do you think we're going to install a new leader? Do you think there are going to be American troops on the ground? Do you think American boots are going to be on the ground there?
Well, the president said that he's essentially putting his special touch on the vice president to be the leader. And the vice president has come out and condemned the abduction of the president. The situation is one in which, at this moment, the regime minus Maduro is still in place. The Cuban actors who have come in to provide kind of bodyguards, they are there. There is a huge network in the military that supports Maduro. The vice president was obviously Maduro's vice president. Immediately you're left with, well, exactly how are you going to pass new laws or tell this new vice president turned president to issue edicts and so forth? And none of that seems to have been planned out, which is another factor. It's easy to take out a leader. It was easy to have an initial military strikes in Afghanistan, easy to have strikes in Iraq, easy to intervene and grab the leader of Venezuela, but then to manage a country, very difficult.
Mhm. And I mean, what's your take that he did not notify Congress at all before these strikes? I mean, they just happened without any warning, and now Maduro, he's in US custody and kind of we don't really know what's going to happen next. Like you were saying, a lot of politicians are still in favor of Maduro. So when we talk about a regime change, like you said, it's not going to be that easy. So what do you think President Trump's next moves are going to be? And kind of how are you going to fight back in Congress?
Well, I'm going to continue pressing for the bill that I introduced and that was supported by many of my colleagues that blocks federal funds for military action against Venezuela. We're also going to have a war powers resolution that we expect to be debated this coming week, introduced by Tim Kaine of Virginia. That resolution essentially says, President, you don't have authorization for this, and you have to remove your forces or your actions, your military actions within 60 days. So there will be a variety of debates, both on the constitutional side and on the funding side, in regard to what the president's undertaking. I think back to, I had the really challenging responsibility of calling families when it was almost always sons, but when their sons who were in uniform were killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we should not be sacrificing our American soldiers, our men and women, to grab oil.
And then is there anything else you want to say about this?
think of the word quagmire, because that's often what happens when you get into nation building with all kinds of bad consequences for a nation. Funds that should be going to build our healthcare, our housing, our education, our infrastructure, end up going to foreign wars. We've spent vast sums, trillions and trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And here we are with a president who pledged not to make the same mistake, doing exactly the same thing.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Senator Merkley. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You're welcome, Noelle. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.